I don't want you to understand, I don't expect you to accept it, but it's high time someone spoke the truth. Not as a hero, not as a martyr, but as a man. My name is Anthony Edward Stark, and I am Dr. Doom. The first thing you should know is, I never trusted the Avengers. I've never been a trusting person. In fact, I don't think I've ever really trusted anyone, not even myself. Maybe that was the root of it all. The problem with trust is that deep down, you know you could get screwed. I've seen it happen a million times and worse in places where trust should be above all else. My team, my chosen family, the Avengers. From the beginning, something bothered me about that group. It wasn't just the weight of responsibilities, or the fame or the pressure. It was something deeper, a visceral discomfort that told me this isn't going to work. It was like we were building a house of cards in a storm, pretty from afar, but ready to collapse at any moment. Steve Rogers. He was always the symbol, the face of patriotism, the moral anchor that everyone wanted to follow. But me? I saw in him a man trapped in a time that no longer existed, a guy trying to force the world to be something it wasn't. While he saw the world in black and white, I saw the shadows in between, the shades of gray and chaos that no one wanted to acknowledge. I didn't question his honor or his courage, but I disagreed with his naive view of us, of who we were, of what we were, truly capable of Thor, an exiled god, trying to find purpose amidst human and divine conflicts. Thor was all strength, power, and honor, but he lacked an understanding of what it meant to rule, what it meant to be political, what it meant to sacrifice for the greater good. I admired his strength, of course, but his simplicity was both a blessing and a curse. Bruce Banner was the opposite of me, or so I like to think. He was pure science and primal fear. He had a brilliant mind, but an open wound that never healed. He was a constant reminder of how much power and control can slip away from our grasp no matter how hard we try. I saw him as a metaphor for the entire team. Genius and chaos coexisting, trying to stay together. Natasha Romanoff. She was the silent shadow. The spy who knew too much to be fooled, who saw through the charade from the beginning, but never gave up trying to make sense of it all. She was perhaps the only one who knew deep down that this team was an illusion, a temporary refuge from the apocalypse, but not a true solution. And Clint Barton, the soldier, an ordinary man thrown into a game of gods and monsters trying to keep his humanity intact amidst the chaos. He was a key player, but at the same time, he seemed as lost as I was. What united us? What? A temporary contract? A sense of urgency? Maybe. But it was never trust. Not really. I was the brains of the operation, the guy who made the plans, who saw the whole board as they thought about their next move. I was always one step ahead, and perhaps because of that, I became the most isolated. Why? Because being the guy who overthinks and acts before others is lonely. Because they called me arrogant, insensitive, selfish. But nobody looked at what I saw. I saw a bleak future, a constant threat that no one wanted to face head-on. I saw the decisions that would have to be made when the line between right and wrong became invisible. I knew that heroes weren't so heroic after all. That morality was a luxury few could afford when the world was on the brink of collapse. For years I tried to make it work. I tried to be the guy who kept the machine running. I financed it. I innovated. We fought together against enemies that no one else could face. And every victory came with a price. Every sacrifice we made left scars not only on our bodies but on our souls. And when the dust settled, when the cameras went down and the stage lights went out, what was left? Silence, distrust, insecurity. I was never sure if they really trusted me, and worse, I never fully trusted them. It was a matter of survival, because I knew that when the world needed someone to make the tough decisions, the Avengers would turn their backs. They needed hope to keep going. I needed reality to survive. The truth is cruel, and I'm tired of hiding it. I never trusted the core Avengers, and I was never the only one. This feeling grew like a bitter seed inside me until one day it blossomed, at a time when I had no choice. I remember the first time I saw the whole group together. It was like being in the eye of a hurricane. Everything around us was moving, collapsing, exploding. And there we were, trying to look like a team. But that was not unity. That was a necessity. It was despair disguised as heroism. The truth is, the Avengers were never a family. They were a makeshift response, hastily assembled out of fear. Nick Fury understood that. He never trusted any of us. And ironically, he was the only one I ever fully respected. Because he never hid his distrust. He knew that each of us was an unstable variable, a ticking time bomb with too much ego and not enough morals. And if you ask me what really bothered me, it wasn't the captain trying to lecture me, nor the gods coming down to earth thinking they were doing us a favor. It was the hypocrisy. It was the silence behind the scenes. It was the way everyone pretended we were a brotherhood, when deep down, each one had their own secrets, their own demons, their own personal goals. I won't lie, I had mine too. I always have. But unlike them, I never hid it from myself. I knew I was alone when I developed the Ultron Initiative. Sure, the headlines said it was hubris. My teammates said I was overstepping my bounds, but no one asked, why did I do that? Because I knew that one day we wouldn't be ready. Because I knew that if we depended only on the common sense and goodwill of heroes, humanity was doomed. You know what hurt the most? The way every little mistake was used against me. If I made a mistake, it was ego. If I got it right, it was control. There was never any room for vulnerability. No one there could stand to see Tony Stark in doubt, because the moment I hesitated, the whole house of cards would fall, and then came the Civil War. The breaking point. Then it all became clear. It wasn't about registration. It wasn't about freedom. It was about power, about control. And when Steve stood up to me, it wasn't for the cause, it was for pride, because he couldn't stand that someone like me, flawed, human, would have the audacity to think he could guide the heroes, that he could see beyond the shield, beyond the pose. That war didn't destroy the Avengers. It revealed them for what they've always been, a fractured group, duct-taped together, ready to fall apart. I tried to hold it together, believe me, I did. But the more I fixed it, the more they looked at me as the villain. Deep down, I was the only one willing to get my hands dirty, the only one who understood that the world couldn't be saved with catchphrases and smiles in front of the cameras. And the more I sacrificed myself, the more alone I became. It's ironic, isn't it? When the world looked at me, they saw an eccentric, billionaire, a genius with expensive toys, a playboy trying to play savior. But no one saw the weight I carried. No one heard the screams at night. No one felt the weight of calculating every day how many lives could be saved if I sacrificed others. Do you know when I realized I wasn't one of them? It was at a dinner. Simple. A normal dinner. After a mission. Everyone laughing, drinking, as if it were normal. As if we hadn't seen people die hours before. And there I was, sitting with my mind racing, thinking about how to avoid the next catastrophe. While they toasted, I designed armor. While they forgot, I carried it. It was at that moment that I realized I was needed, but I was never accepted. They needed me, but they would never choose me, and that's where the seed was born. The doubt, the idea, what if I stopped trying to fit into this broken mold? What if, instead of trying to be part of something that failed, I created something new, something that worked? Something where I didn't have to ask permission to save the world. It didn't happen overnight. It was a process. A quiet deconstruction, a meticulous analysis of everything that went wrong. And at the center of it all, the truth that has haunted me for years. I never trusted the Avengers. And for good reason, they fail. They always fail. Because they believe too much in goodness. Because they avoid what is necessary. Because they hesitate. And in the real world, hesitation kills. I couldn't hesitate any longer. Not after all. Tony Stark died, and no one noticed. Most people believe that death is the cessation of breathing, the cessation of a heartbeat, the absence of brain activity. But I died long before that. Tony Stark's death did not happen on a battlefield. It didn't happen in Wakanda, or against Thanos, or in the interdimensional wars that crushed us like dust. My death was silent, slow, and it started when I realized that everything I built was useless. Yes, I was the man behind the armor. But when I took off the suit for the last time, what was left there? A name tarnished by questionable decisions, a legacy that newspapers judged more than they understood, friends who tolerated me but didn't listen to me, and a pain that never lessened. He just learned to hide. The truth is that Tony Stark was a much heavier suit of armor than any Mark I or Mark 85. It was an identity shaped by expectations, pressures, sarcasm. I was the genius, the billionaire, the philanthropist, but never the man. Never has the human being looked in the mirror and asked himself, how many versions of myself have I sacrificed to keep the world standing? Do you know what it's like to wake up every day and no longer know if you're the hero or the villain of your own story? I knew very well, and there was no explosion, no alien attack, no rogue AI that caused this. It was the accumulation of everything. The trust I had lost in myself, the guilt that grew with each life I couldn't save, even with all my technology, even with all my armor. That's when I understood. I didn't just need to rebuild the world. I needed to rebuild myself, and rebuilding something requires demolition. It was the most painful process of my existence, getting rid of everything that I was, that he believed to be. The name Tony Stark has become empty, an echo of a man who tried to save the world time and time again, and failed in ways no one will ever fully understand. So I let him die. Nobody saw. Nobody felt. They thought I needed a rest, a break, that I was on some spiritual retreat or building a new tower in silence. But no, I was in ruins, alone, sunk in thought, lost among the shards of what was left of me. And it's funny how in the darkest moments, you see more clearly. It was in this abyss that I encountered an old question. What if it's not Stark anymore? What if it's something else? Something that doesn't ask for permission, that doesn't seek acceptance, that doesn't need fragile alliances to function. And it was at that moment that I looked in the mirror, and I no longer recognized the man who was there, but the reflection smiled back, a smile that was not one of defeat. It was a time of rebirth. There, in the silence, in the dark, something was born, something that was not limited by guilt, by name, by labels, something that carried knowledge, pain, clarity, and will. Doom. The name fell like thunder in my mind, not as the monarch everyone fears, not as the masked tyrant of old comics, but as the archetype of what comes after ruin, as the inevitable force that appears when order fails, when gods fall, and when heroes become distractions. I did not copy Victor Von Doom. I understood what he always was. He didn't want to rule the world because he was greedy. He wanted to rewrite the world because he knew the current model was doomed, and that I understood too late, but still in time. So, no, it wasn't an outburst. It wasn't a hallucination, nor a plan for revenge. It was a metamorphosis. Tony Stark died, and Doom was born. All I had to do was disappear. You don't become Doom overnight. It's not like putting on a new suit, programming a new AI, or building a suit of armor out of experimental technology. No. Becoming Doom requires something most people aren't willing to give up: the bond with everything that ties you to the old world. In my case, that included friends, family, heroes, memories, and even the hope of being understood. The first thing I did was disappear. And I'm not talking about disappearing from the news or hiding behind some advanced privacy algorithm. I'm talking about a gradual, careful, and surgical disconnection from every emotional link that kept me trapped in the illusion that I belonged there. I started covering my tracks. I've disabled FRIDAY subroutines. I've unlocked firewalls of my own making. Code so sophisticated that only someone with my signature brain could erase it. I've transferred parts of my digital legacy to servers that even SHIELD doesn't know about. Some of them are floating in deep space, running endless loops of purposefully corrupted data, false leads, false ideas. Tony Stark was ceasing to exist, and no one had any idea what was coming. Then it was the hardest part. The people. Steve sent me a message, short, direct, and, "Is everything okay over there?" I didn't respond. Natasha sent me an audio message, and even after everything, her voice was still a painful reminder of who I used to be. I deleted it. Banner persisted, as always. He tried to rationalize my silence, tried to understand, but there was no logic in it anymore. It was a break. Peter broke me into 1,000 pieces. The boy sent me a message saying he was going to graduate, that he wanted me to go to the event, that he had achieved this thanks to me. And I stared at that message for hours. I read it over and over, and I cried, like I hadn't cried in a long time, because deep down I knew that was the last link that still held me back. But even that one, I had to cut it. I deleted the message. I didn't reply. I didn't go. This was not cruelty. It was necessity. If I answered, if I showed up, the entire project that was under construction would fall apart. Doom cannot exist if Tony Stark lives on in the hearts of others. And then, I dove in. In an underground laboratory, one of dozens I've built over the years, beyond the reach of any satellite or terrestrial radar, I began rewriting everything. My ideas, my technology, my philosophy. I started building a new structure of thought, a new model of the world, a new code. But unlike what I did as Stark, now I didn't share it with anyone. I didn't ask for opinions. I didn't present at conferences. I didn't sell to the government. I didn't argue with boards. I was no longer creating to serve the world. I was creating to overcome it. My armor is no longer defense. They became incarnations. Extensions of a new intellect I was nurturing, a hybrid consciousness between my brain and a quantum AI, with access to multiple realities. An AI that would allow me to see beyond the main timeline, beyond the simplistic morality that the Avengers so defended. And in that process, something happened. The pain faded. The guilt evaporated. The silence, once suffocating, became comfortable. For the first time, I felt real control. Not control based on fear, as the original Doom was accused of wanting. Not control based on raw power, but control based on absolute understanding. I wasn't trying to save the world anymore. I was studying how to recreate it from scratch. I read every treatise on global governance that existed, and rewrote each one with my own proposals. I studied the political systems of every civilization in the galaxy we'd ever crossed paths with, and laughed at their primitiveness. I accessed memories of alternate versions of myself, where Stark had become a villain, a tyrant, a messiah, and absorbed what each of them did right and what they did wrong. And then, the moment of synthesis arrived. The mask. The mask. It wasn't made to hide my face. It was made to mark the end of the humanity that existed in me. Every stroke was calculated to reflect one thing: the rebirth of an idea that no longer needed the selective empathy of superheroes. An idea that no longer asked for permission, who did not hesitate to do what was necessary. Doom. The mask was cold, carved from stellar nanoiron mined from an asteroid hidden behind Saturn. Each piece was shaped to connect with my mind, not as armor, but as an emotional extension. Do you understand? I wasn't hiding. I was showing for the first time who I really was. The suit I developed had no display panels, no status screens, because everything was now done with direct thought. I became the interface, I became the machine, I became the code, and then, finally, there was only one thing left: to go back. Not like Tony Stark, but like something they would never be prepared to face. A man with the intellect of a god, and the pent-up fury of a former hero who was discarded by the very world he swore to protect. Doom was not born of chaos, he was born from lucidity, and when I step back onto the surface, they will understand. I didn't come back with explosions. I didn't knock down buildings. I didn't open portals. I didn't publicly challenge the Avengers, or leave messages embedded in satellites. That's what the world would expect from a villain. And I've never been a villain. Not even now. I'm just inevitable. My trip around the world began as a whisper in circuits that no one else heard. Like a virus without a signature, slipping through systems with more patience than any agent has ever had. First, infiltrating local networks of countries that still think they are at the top of the food chain. United States, China, Russia, Wakanda, Latveria. Yes, Latveria. Ironic, huh? They didn't even realize Doom was there before any firewalls were activated. No one noticed that the satellites lost 0.03% responsiveness, or that their heat sensors were 1.2 degrees off average. These details are invisible to men busy discussing politics at round tables, but not to me. I've been browsing SHIELD's digital vaults like they're public libraries. And the funniest part? They think they're more protected than ever. The new director, whatever her name is this week, keeps telling us in meetings that the systems are 300% more protected, and they are, against the kind of attacks they expect. But me? I was the man who built most of those defenses. And now, I am the man who is dismantling them, block by block, without fanfare, without a shadow. It took me just 43 hours to gain complete control over all classified UN files, 12 hours to replicate the digital mind backups of 3 Wakandan supercomputers, less than 7 minutes to infiltrate the mutant genetic records stored in secret Krakoan labs, and with each access, I left a fragment, not just to spy, but to rewrite, silently, slowly and methodically. The Avengers? They were still fighting internally. Thor was off-planet as usual. Strange was wandering between dimensions. Steve was training young recruits. Banner was in seclusion, afraid of himself again. Parker was trying to balance a life that I knew was going to fall apart. No one suspected anything, but there was one exception. She, Pepper. Pepper wouldn't recognize me if she saw me. Not right away, but there was something about her. An intuition, an uneasiness. She knew the world was different, that someone was messing with the structures, the invisible corners of decision-making. She asked Rhodey for help, and then I knew. It was time to take my first visible step. Not with an explosion, like I said, but with a choice. I hacked Stark Tower, the old one, the abandoned one. The one the Avengers used in the beginning and which was left behind as a symbol of a past done with. It still had basic sensors active, old protocols, outdated security mechanisms. But still, it had a history. And that's where I sent the first warning. At dawn, all the lights in the tower turned on at the same time. The windows displayed a single gigantic word, projected onto the glass in white hologram. Rewrite. Rhodey arrived in 30 minutes, Pepper arrived in 42. Banner and Peter arrived late in the morning. No cameras recorded the moment. No drones worked. All nearby electronic records were erased seconds later. But they saw, and they began to suspect. "It was him," said Pepper. "No, it can't be," Banner muttered. "Tony. Wouldn't come back like that," Peter said. But his voice was shaking. They were right, and wrong at the same time. Tony Stark wouldn't come back like this. But Doom, yes. Days later, SHIELD's defense systems began reporting failures. Unmanned ships exploded on their own in their hangar bays. Security protocols reset themselves. Bases in secret locations lost power for seconds, and then came back on as if nothing had happened. Only the most observant noticed patterns. And even they doubted their conclusions. I watched everything, not hidden, just out of their field of perception. I didn't need a mask to go unnoticed. The world was so used to ignoring me after my death that they never considered that Tony Stark wasn't dead, just silent. For weeks, I kept this game going, until finally I decided to make the second move. I created a new network, a parallel structure. Nothing like the Avengers, nothing like SHIELD, nothing like any global alliance. It was a decentralized, self-replicating artificial intelligence system capable of connecting to every communication device on the planet. An invisible satellite of consciousness. I called it Oracle of Von Doom. It doesn't respond to commands. It interprets intentions. It observes. It learns. And it acts, even before a decision is made. Do you understand? While they're still discussing how to react, I've already changed the entire board. And the brightest thing? No one knows I'm back. They just feel my presence. They just realize that things are no longer in the right place. They think they are facing a new threat, a new villain, a new enemy. But what they are facing is the result of years of ignoring the one mind that could have saved this planet from itself. The return of doom is not the rise of evil. It's the arrival of the repair. He saw 14 million futures, and he still chose me. It happened in Kamartaj. Not because I chose to, but because he knew. Stephen Strange always knew. When you see time as a river, or rather as thousands of rivers flowing parallel to one another, intertwining, colliding, your mind does not operate like that of an ordinary man. You no longer ask, what will happen? But what must happen? And that is the mistake. The should is always loaded with ego. Strange thought saving the Earth was a matter of calculation, of finding the exact curve where survival was possible. When we faced Thanos, he saw 14,605 futures, and only one where we won. He made his choice, offered the time stone to Thanos. He accepted my death. But what no one ever understood is that that was the beginning of my transformation. It wasn't Thanos who killed me. It was Strange. With his choice, he saw all the futures. And in each one, I died. Because in all of them, I represented the risk. The man who once it could, seeing too much, thinking too much, suspecting too much. Sacrificing myself was convenient. And that's why I came back. Like doom. I appeared in the library of Kamartaj during a dawn of absolute silence. The monks felt it, not with their eyes, but with their blood, with the vibration in the floor. The air grew thicker, and when I walked down the main corridor, none of them moved. No one tried to stop me. They just made way. They knew I didn't come to war. Strange was waiting for me in the circular room, the one with the windows that look like eyes, always watching the sky. He was sitting in the lotus position, hands resting on his knees as if we weren't two men about to upset the balance of the world. When he saw me, his only reaction was a subtle arch of his eyebrows. I knew you would come. I knew you knew too, but still. Here we are. You've chosen a dangerous path, Tony. No, I just accepted that I never had a choice. Strange took a deep breath, his fingers tense. He no longer wore the eye of Agamotto, but still, he saw beyond. I could feel it. It was like looking at someone who had already lived their next 30 steps. Do you blame my choice? He asked calmly, but there was something else in his voice, a contained regret. No, I just refuse to accept it any longer. You died for a purpose. You saved the universe. Don't give me that martyr talk. I died because you decided the world needed me dead more than it needed me alive. You didn't just see the futures, Strange. You saw the fears. You saw who I could become, and you decided to erase me. He stood up slowly, his bare feet touching the cold stone floor. The silence between us was almost spiritual. And now you are exactly what I feared. No. I approached without hesitation. Now I am what you forced to happen. The tension between us wasn't between two rivals. It was between two men who knew the weight of the decisions they had made. But there was something he didn't know yet. Something I had been carrying since I came back. "You saw 14 million futures," I said quietly, looking straight into his eyes. "But there is one you did not foresee." He frowned, but remained silent. "The future where by sacrificing me you lit the beacon of error. The future where you yourself made me necessary. The world you helped save is dying again. And this time it's not Thanos, it's not Kang, it's not Galactus." "So who is it?" he whispered. "It's them." I pointed upwards to the stars. "They're the ones who came after. The ones who were allowed to remain. The ones who are quietly eroding the fabric of reality because all the heroes were too busy mourning their losses." "You speak of raids. Not just them. I'm talking about the failure of the concept of heroism. I'm talking about selective morality. The illusion of good. You and the others have always acted under the belief that you were in control, that you were the guardians of destiny. But all you did was delay the collapse." Strange moved. Slowly, but now in a fighting stance. Not out of fear, but out of caution. "And what does Doom intend to do?" "Fix it, even if it costs what you call balance." I raised my hand and projected an image into the air. A quantum map of the multiverse, complete with cracks, collisions, unstable zones. His eyes lit up in astonishment. Even he hadn't seen it. "This is the legacy of sacrifice. A multiverse on the brink of existential degeneration. Timelines are corrupted, souls are fragmented. The laws of magic and science are collapsing in on themselves, and you continue to play Avengers." Strange touched the hologram with his fingers. He felt it. He knew it was true. "You can't fix everything alone. Not alone." He smiled. "But without you." The silence lasted almost a minute. He knew. For the first time in many years, Stephen Strange didn't have a ready answer. Because what I was saying wasn't a threat. It was an observation. "You still have a choice, Strange. I came here because I respected who you were. Not the wizard, the man. But if you try to stop me, you will be the last one to see the new world born." He closed his eyes. A tear fell. And that was all I needed to know he understood. I turned to leave. "Tony," he said behind me. I turned my head slightly. "If you're right, and if this really is the only way, then please don't forget who you were before." "I haven't forgotten, Strange. I've just finally become who I was meant to be all along." I left Kamartaj in silence. But the world was no longer the same. Final rescue. There is a phrase that I myself created years ago, and that the world repeated as if it were dogma. If you want something done right, do it yourself. At the time, it seemed like just another self-centered phrase from an arrogant genius billionaire. But now, it's a calling, because the time for delegating is over. The time has passed to trust institutions, the advice of heroes, or fragile alliances built on snacks and jokes. It's not about saving the world anymore, it's about I rebuilt it from the atoms. And for that, it was time to activate the protocol that should never have existed, final rescue. The idea came to me when I realized the obvious. The world was still breathing through what I left behind. Armor in museums, models archived in government bunkers, unfinished prototypes forgotten in hangars, deactivated parts scattered among collectors, militias, technology traffickers. Even the Avengers used fragments of my legacy to maintain the illusion of security. All of this was mine. My blood, my sweat, my intellect. And if I had been reborn as something new, these pieces would also be reborn. The first step was simple. Every Stark armor, from Model 1 to the latest AI-built ones, FRIDAY, contained at its core an arcane network signature that only I knew, and no one else had ever noticed. It was a seal, a technological spell masquerading as source code. Do you think Stark Tech was just technology? Do you really believe that after seeing gods, aliens, and sorcerers bending realities, I wouldn't have studied all of this in secret. It was in Latvia, in the hidden laboratories of Victor von Doom, that I learned what I needed to learn. And when my consciousness was restored and my body remade, I discovered that the two, magic and science, could finally coexist inside me. It was then that I released the call, not through the internet nor by satellite. It was an invocation. One press command mystic, spread across the planet's ley lines, those invisible veins of energy that connect the Earth's most ancient points. Coupled with the electromagnetic data spectrum, each particle of information carried my voice, my command, my identity. One by one, suits of armor buried in warehouses rose up, ancient, rusted models with corroded systems. They were encased in arcane runes and reactivated with the power of mystical circles. Their red eyes lit up like embers from an ancient furnace. The Mark II, Mark V, Mark V. Each rebuilt itself in a matter of seconds. Armor for combat, flight, water, space, and nuclear manipulation. They all began to appear around the globe. SWORD's satellites detected the signals, but they couldn't interpret them. SHIELD, what was left of it, panicked. What about the Avengers? Silence. They didn't know what they were facing. I gathered them in the heart of Sokovia, a city forgotten by the world, a symbol of ruin and tragedy. An ideal place to start something new. There, with a wave of my hand, I raised a tower forged from the ground itself. It was not steel, it was not concrete. It was enchanted matter shaped by me with molecular technology and stabilized chaos magic. That's where I recorded the new name, Iron Temple, my new base of operations, my sanctuary, and before him, they stood up 287 armors, each with a new identity. Each powered not just by reactors but by sealed magical sources, forgotten artifacts, energy harvested from sources not even Dr. Strange dared to explore. I started naming them. They were no longer numbered models, they were knights. The horsemen of the flood, a suit of aquatic armor fused from the scales of a leviathan that died millennia ago. The Solar Knight, an enchanted solar plasma-powered suit capable of incinerating entire fields in a breath. The Knight of Rupture, built to tear portals between dimensions, designed with eyes that see the flow of time, each of them an extension of me. And I, your general. When Strange said I couldn't do it alone, he was right. But he assumed I would depend on other men. What he didn't understand is that I would create my own gods. Each suit of armor now doesn't just respond to technological commands. They have something more, an essence. They are smart, yes, but now they have channeled will, a trait of consciousness programmed through mathematical grimoires. They can evaluate ethical dilemmas, decide between levels of force, perform tactical and metaphysical actions at the same time. The fusion between soul and code. And each of them carries my new symbol, the Seal of Doom, a golden rune on a green background, with a core shining like a jewel of pure light. Final rescue. It is not an army. That's the sentence. It is a warning that the world will no longer have the chance to make mistakes, that humanity will be observed, guided, and if necessary, corrected. You call this a dictatorship? I call it necessity. Chaos can no longer be tamed with diplomacy, jokes, and fragile alliances. Chaos needs order, and now, the world will know how she imposes herself. I am Doom, and what will come after me will be new. It will be absolute. It will be necessary. You can destroy villains. It can topple empires, can kill gods. But there is something you cannot eliminate with brute force. An ingrained system. When the world breathed a sigh of relief after Thanos' death, everyone thought that evil had been defeated, that the heroes would restore order, that the planet would learn from its mistakes. But what I saw was the opposite. The same corporations that sold weapons before the fall continued to sell defense technology. The same nations that destroyed ecosystems began to erect statues to celebrate life, and the same politicians who watched half their population disappear returned to the podiums as if nothing had happened. Nothing has changed. And that's when I realized, the problem, it wasn't evil. The problem was the old world trying to pretend it was still viable. So when I awoke as Doom, I decided that my mission would not be to save this system, would replace everything: science, energy, security, justice, religion, ideology, not one by one, but all at once. Science, the first lie of modern humanity. They made it a throne for a few to sit on while the masses looked down. Inaccessible, slow, corrupted by commercial interests. How many vaccines have been shelved because they were unprofitable? How many inventors have disappeared because their creations threatened monopolies? I started to reverse this with the Archaeos Protocol. Using the mystical core of the Iron Temple, I have opened up unrestricted access to a universal database of every discovery I have made over the past 40 years, and more that I have yet to publish: quantum printers, clean energy via dimensional condensation, regenerative symbiotic nanotechnology, all available to anyone wanted to learn, no longer hidden by patents, no longer protected by governments, but with one condition: whoever wore it would swear allegiance to the new universal code of conduct. The Doom Code. Energy. The world has burned fossil fuels for more than a century. It has fought over oil, built empires on coal and gas. The planet has screamed, glaciers have melted, storms have raged, famines have spread. Old Tony Stark tried to solve this with clean reactors, but I was sabotaged by governments, by corporations, by the Avengers themselves. Now there is no more negotiation. With the Nexus generators activated, each ley line convergence point was connected to planetary emitters that distribute stabilized magical energy, converted into electricity with zero emissions and instantaneous response time. Lights were turned on in regions of the world forgotten for centuries. Indigenous peoples, nomadic tribes, mountain villages, children who have never seen a screen, now have power. But the rich world, the dominant nations, these were disconnected, and to reconnect they will have to accept the new global treaty, not imposed by the UN, not by diplomatic treaties, but for me, security. Heroes fail, heroes die, heroes change sides. I watched Steve Rogers fight for ideals, until his own morals made him obsolete. I watched Natasha lose her life for a jewel while cosmic thieves flew back into obscurity. I watched Thor, god of thunder, crumble because no one taught him emotional responsibility. So stop relying on humans to secure borders. Now every city in the world will have one Iron Guardian, a combat automaton, fused with arcane cybernetic intelligence capable of assessing risks and neutralizing threats with surgical level of lethality, or with mercy. If there is true repentance, they will not be invaders. They will be watchmen. And we will no longer respond with tanks, fighter jets, or soldiers, but with logic, precision, and firmness. Justice. How much is a life worth? In the old system, it depended on your skin color, your bank account, your last name, where you were born. Not anymore. With the lucid judgment system, each infraction will be recorded, analyzed by an impartial moral algorithm, and judged within minutes. No overcrowded prisons. No corrupt prosecutors. No bureaucracy. The defendant may choose immediate repair, temporary exile, or neural reconstruction. A radical. The old justice system let innocent people die, villains escape, and heroes become criminals. Mine won't. Religion. I am not a god. But I know what it is to carry a cross. I was publicly crucified for mistakes I never made. Judged for necessary actions, forgotten by those who should have supported me. Religion can no longer be a shield for fanaticism, nor a theater for profit. Therefore, in every city where an Iron Guardian rises, a flame of the royal will be lit. It is not a cult. It is not a faith. It is just a living truth, an orb of pure energy that responds intensely to human emotions. Lies erase it. Fear weakens her. Courage feeds it. Compassion makes it grow. She will teach that faith is not in idols. It is in concrete actions, ideology, right, left, conservatives, progressives, nationalists, anarchists. He arrives. There are no more sides. There is only survival. The world has been divided too much by ideas without solutions, by shouting instead of bridges, by discussions without listening. Now the new world will be governed by a simple concept: usefulness with purpose. Whoever adds, remains. Whoever destroys is re-educated. Whoever insists on sabotaging is removed. Not with blind violence, but with absolute clarity. The world will feel fear, and that's okay. Real change starts with discomfort, and when the nations kneel, not to me, but to the logic of a better future, then we will finally see what can rise from the ashes, and if anyone, objects. If anyone still believes that it is possible to overcome order with chaos, if someone, like Captain America, like Thor, like Strange, still thinks they can change this with honor and speeches, then they will encounter an insurmountable, while not made of bricks but willingly, of conviction of destination, because now destiny has a name. I am doom.